In recent years, electronic vehicles, or EVs, have really gained popularity. And now that manufacturers such as Hyundai are releasing relatively affordable options, they're opening them up to a much wider audience. The Hyundai IONIQ 5 is available in two flavours. A two-wheel drive option with a single 160 kilowatt electric motor at the rear, coming in at $71,900. And this example, the four-wheel drive dual motor setup with a 155 kilowatt motor at the back and a 70 kilowatt motor at the front, combining to give you 225 kilowatts of power and 605 newton meters of torque through all four wheels, coming in at $75,900. LED lights front and rear do a fantastic job of lighting the road and making the IONIQ 5 visible out on the road. I particularly like the rear lights, which seem to be 8-bit inspired and tie in beautifully with the retro yet modern aesthetic. Aerodynamics have been carefully considered to enhance the IONIQ 5's range. In some areas, such as the fastback body profile and sculpted body lines, it works beautifully. Whereas in other areas, such as the dual aerodynamic wheels, it tends to look a bit awkward. You can't argue with results though, as Hyundai claims the drag coefficient of an IONIQ 5 comes in at 0.288. For scale, a LaFerrari comes in at 0.30. I wouldn't go telling the boys down at the pub that the IONIQ 5 is a Ferrari beater, but it is a cool tidbit to keep in your pocket. The cabin of the IONIQ 5 is really open and airy, and Hyundai have actually gone to great lengths to show you the fact that this isn't a traditional car. I say that because obviously you don't need a transmission tunnel, and because of that you have all this open space here. In the middle we have what's called the universal island, and this can actually move forward and backwards depending on what you want to do. Not too sure why you would. We do have your armrest here, a very shallow cubby just here for your phone and keys perhaps. It does lift up out of the way and gives you a bigger storage bin here. We have a phone wireless charging port down here. We've got two USB ports. If we slide this guy out of the way, because once again no transmission tunnel, we can just stretch out and drive like this, because you know that'll be comfortable. In front of you you have two 12.3 inch screens which do a great job of displaying all the car's information. If you've got your map running, or if you just want to see where the next charging station is, your radio, climate control, etc. The screens themselves, very high resolution, very crisp, very nice, and also fast response time, which is great. There's a ton of safety tech on board as well, as you'd expect, and probably my favourite feature is that in both wing mirrors there are cameras, so when you flick your indicator on, in the central screen here, you actually see what that camera is seeing. So if I put my left indicator on, I'll see what the left wing mirror camera sees. The visibility of this car is actually fantastic, but it just gives you that confidence that you know exactly what is going on around you. And we also have the vision glass roof. It runs the entire length of the car. It's not a sunroof, so it doesn't open, but it does just allow a lot of natural light into the cabin, which is quite nice. The seats that we have here are eco-pressed leather. Now to me, I don't actually feel any difference between these and normal leather seats, so they're very comfortable. In the front, we have ventilation, we have heating, we also have 12 ways of adjustment, and a little bit of a gimmick, but when you're charging this, you can put the seat in a position called zero gravity mode. Rear space is quite adequate. The boot is 527 litres with the rear seats up, which doesn't feel all that large, although you can fold the seats flat and you do get a lot more room. And there is also a small storage bin in the front. This houses your emergency charging kit and has 24 litres of space. So you could probably put your phone there if you want. Once again, not sure why you would, but you can. It's all very familiar but quite quirky. So at the end of the day, I mean, this is just a normal car, I get it, except it is running on electricity, not petrol. So what that means is, as I've covered, you don't have a transmission tunnel, so you have a sort of odd amount of room. We have wheel-mounted paddle shifters. Now, in a normal automatic car, you know, right paddle goes up gear, left paddle goes down gear. Here, though, this covers the regen options of the IONIQ 5. So if we press the left paddle, which would traditionally be down gear enough, you can go full regeneration, which means you can operate this car just on the accelerator. You never have to touch the brake. And that does sound odd, and at first it is a little bit, but you'd be surprised how quick you get used to it and how intuitive the stopping distances actually are. So I've been driving this for a week now, and I've actually just been using the full regen, only using the accelerator to operate the car. As soon as you lift off, it starts braking. It's quite nifty actually. The transmission stalk down here on the right, once again, it's not too foreign. You've got drive, neutral, reverse and park, all fairly standard. However, when you go to use them and cycle between the gears, because there's no gearbox, there's no real discernible difference between them, which is a little bit disconcerting. So if I want to go from neutral to drive or drive to reverse, whatever I want to do, rather than a kind of thunk as the car goes into gear, it's just a letter that lights up. So you have to really pay attention to what you've done. It's a little bit strange. And the same can be said that when you start and stop this car. So we have a starter button down here. Once again, traditional car, you press it, the car comes to life and you know what's going on. Here though, you press the button and nothing. I mean, the only indication that you can start driving is a tiny little ready text up on the dash. So once again, all little things that I'm sure you get used to really quickly over time, but it just makes the driving experience a little bit different, a little bit left of center. Now, as far as driving the IONIQ 5 goes, it's a pleasure. In all honesty, it's so quiet and so smooth. I mean, you move off the line, there's no driveline shunting, there's no waiting for the engine to get up to speed. It's just instant torque and you just move away softly. This isn't a Tesla, so you're not going to be setting any 0 to 100 records, but it's swift enough. And also the fact that you don't actually feel any gear changes because there's no gearbox, it does mean that you can get a little bit disorientated with your speed. So when you're coming up to a speed camera, for example, you really need to have a look at the speedo and make sure what speed you're doing. There's been a couple of times where I've sailed up to a speed camera and thought, well, hang on a minute, I actually don't know how fast I'm going, because you don't have that sense of speed that a gearbox gives you. An area that Hyundai have placed a lot of effort in is NVH, or noise, vibration and harshness, because obviously we don't have the engine and driveline noise to kind of mask out the outside world. You'd expect to sort of hear just about everything that's happening outside the cabin. So I'm glad to report that Hyundai have done a great job of making sure there's a lot of sound deadening materials here. All of that combines to give you a cabin that really doesn't feel like it's fragile, thin, tinny, any sort of adjective you want to use. You don't really hear what's going on outside. Now, it's not Bentley spec, but it's certainly a lot more comfortable than I had expected. And because you don't have engine noise, you don't have driveline noise, you've controlled NVH really well, you'd think this is an environment to have an absolutely awesome stereo system. Unfortunately though, the 8-speaker Bose system that's in the IONIQ 5 is just plain disappointing. If you're someone who just wants to listen to the radio, then it's perfectly fine, it's perfectly adequate, you'll be fine. However, if you want to crank your tunes, if you want to do some karaoke, you're going to be pretty disappointed. There's no real clarity up top, it doesn't get that loud, the quality just isn't there. Suspension-wise, the IONIQ 5 handles everything really well. I just sort of expected it to be a little bit jittery over sort of undulations and imperfect roads, but my week with the IONIQ 5, it's handled everything really nicely, especially around the city roads, Sydney city roads I should say. It's been very comfortable, hasn't felt unnerved or fazed by anything. I will say though that you need to remember that this is a city car, this is an A to B car. If you drive it like a performance car, you are going to see it fall down and it will wash wide if you throw it into corners with any kind of gusto. Although I don't really imagine the people that buy this car are going to be doing that sort of driving with it anyway. Now the biggest question I have with this car and with EVs in general is just around charging. So obviously I get these cars for a week and I drive around and I think, okay, look, if I need to go put petrol in it, that's fine. I just drive to a servo, fill it up, job done. 5 minutes later, I'm off on my way. And it's just a process that is extremely simple and easy to get your head around. With this though, we obviously need a charging station. Where are they? Is it free? How long does it take? All those sorts of questions. So thankfully, the IONIQ 5 will keep you up to date with where charging stations are in the nav screen, which is quite handy. And also we're about to arrive at a charging station here at Sydney Olympic Park, and I'm going to find out what it takes to charge this car. Hopefully this goes well. Right, so sit rep. Firstly, the NRMA charger didn't even work, so I had to leave there, called their hotline, and sure enough, the station itself was buggered. So awesome NRMA, what's that about always being there for you? Then I've come here to Parramatta Hyundai and gone to use their charger. It didn't work at first, had to call their support line, had to get that fixed. Granted, the support line were fantastic to deal with, but I think I've spent about half an hour now just trying to get this thing to start to charge. Or it's just going to a petrol station, you just fill up and you're gone. So I'm guessing those sort of hiccups will get ironed out in time, but it's just something to be mindful of, and I guess that's just going to be EV life. So I suppose while we wait for this to charge, it's just you and me, have a chat. So what do I think about the IONIQ 5? Well, let's start with the design. Firstly, I'm glad that Hyundai didn't do what other manufacturers do and try and go over the top, sci-fi, spaceshipy, and really ram down your throat the fact that this is the future. We get it. This design is based on their first ever passenger car, the Pony, and I have to admit that despite the fact that I've had some pretty cool cars thanks to Exhaust Notes Australia, this is the one that's garnered the most attention this week. I've had heaps of people wanting to come up and talk to me about it. You see people in traffic turning their heads to have a look at it. Now granted, it is a very polarizing design. I haven't had anyone come up to me and say, yeah, that's okay. It's either they want to tell me they absolutely love it or they want to tell me that it's absolutely ugly, whichever way. But you can't deny the fact that this does get attention. Overall though, the EV experience, it's been really good and really bad. I mean, the comfort level in traffic, it's just awesome. However, the fact that on a Sunday morning I've spent over half an hour just trying to find somewhere to charge the thing. I've finally got it to plug in and start charging, but I've got no idea how long I'm here for or how much juice I'll get. It's just a faff. Whereas at least in a normal car, you just head down to the servo, 5 minutes later, you're in, you're out, job done. Now I've got no doubt this is going to improve over time and it's just going to become a normal part of our culture. But right now it is something that you need to be aware of. And obviously if you get something installed at home whereby you can then charge your car at home, then this is a non-issue. But for someone like me, this is my first ever time using an EV, having to call a support line on how to actually fill the thing up just seems almost embarrassing. But to be fair, the guys here at ChargeFox did a great job. They had to reset the charger to make it work. It's all done now, thankfully, but as I said, it just seems over the top. After doing 1,000 push-ups and squats, I found that it was going to take another 10 hours before the IONIQ was fully charged. So what do you think of the Hyundai IONIQ 5? For me, it's my first ever foray into an EV, and I have to say I really do understand how they'd make a great daily driver. Perhaps I wouldn't have one if it was my only car in the garage, but for city duties I fully understand it. But what about you? Is this a car that you like? Do you hate it? And what about EVs in general? Are they on the horizon for your next purchase, or do you just want to stay away from them altogether? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.